right. Well, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to our webinar. Or welcome back for any of you that have been to previous webinars. What's changed since any of our earlier webinars is that version 3.2.1 has now been retired as of the end of March this year, which means version 4 is the current live standard. But we are aware that some organizations are not yet fully up to speed with the new requirements. So what we're going to do today is provide you with some guidance and context for what the changes mean with version 4 and what you should do. And we're also going to make sure there's plenty of opportunity for you to ask us any of your own questions. And we've had a few questions actually sent already in advance. Specifically in today's session, we're going to cover what's changed and what do those changes mean for you and your organizations. Help you understand your responsibilities and options. We're going to talk about strategies for a smooth transition to version 4. We've obviously had quite a lot of experience in the field now, so we can talk about some of the key blockers that we've experienced, guidance on what you should do, a little bit about how we can help you, including a brand new free tool that I'm going to introduce a little bit later on, and then a Q&A, or what I'm going to call an APA, which is an Ask Pete Anything. And talking of which, most of you probably know Pete, but for those of you who don't, Pete's our co-founder and CEO, and he is one of the most experienced PCI QSAs, Qualified Security Assessors in the country, so is ideally placed to talk through the changes to version 4. And I'm Tony Harbron. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Pete.
Cool, thank you, Tony, and good afternoon, one and all. So yes, we've been looking at the changes and where we are with PCI compliance, what's actually changed with version 4 and what do they mean. So just to reiterate the changes with version 4, the bottom line is it's got to meet your security needs of the payment card industry. So there's a lot of emphasis around security in general, but the purpose of payment card industry compliance is around securing that cardholder data environment. So why is that important? Well, there's a lot of security controls that move with the times and technology changes. And some of these changes are now implemented within version 4 of PCI DSS. We can't spend all day on the call talking about all the changes, but in summary, some of the bigger ones that may impact you, we'll certainly talk about. And there's a couple here which multi-factor authentication requirements. It was just admins require that, but it's now any access requirements to the cardholder data environment require multi-factor authentication. Longer passwords as well. So complex passwords are now required. It's a minimum of 12 characters to a password now, as opposed to 7, which was the long-standing version 3.2.1 in there. There are obviously exceptions to that. If your systems can't take longer characters, then reverting back to 8 characters. But again, that's a sort of new technical control there. And also there's a big one, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about, is the new e-commerce and phishing requirements and certainly file integrity monitoring services that we need to be in place really for any of your e-commerce platforms and that. So again, this is the ethos of payment card industry compliance. You've probably seen it before in other standards, etc., but it's really promoting security now as a continuous process. It's always been, it's an annual assessment. It's always been a single point in time. You would check to see if you're compliant. They're trying to change the landscape a little bit in terms of keeping you compliant throughout the year, not just that single point in time. And as we know, criminals never sleep. Ongoing security is absolutely critical to protecting your cardholder data, as well as your business as a whole. So just here, there's a couple of changes. So roles and responsibilities is a new change. That's an immediate change to version 4. So this is really around clearly assigning roles and responsibilities for your staff and your organisation. For example, when you're in charge of internet connections, security around databases, etc., you've got to clearly call out those responsibilities and those types of people that have that role within the organisation. For us and for you, there's added guidance to help better understand how to implement some of these controls and maintain that security of cardholder data. So that's a good thing. And we've got a lot of resource that we can share around that, as well as the PCI Council website promoting that as well. There's a whole load of new reporting from our side of the fence, if you like. It's going to be more. There's a lot of improvements. There's more transparency, and there's a lot more front-loaded scope details and along with diagrams and etc. So there's a lot more transparency to the audience that will read these reports, which is only a good thing. Also, one of the big changes is giving organisations now flexibility around achieving your security objectives. So there's a couple of changes here as well. I'll mention them. Now, previously, you weren't allowed to use shared or group accounts, generic accounts. So version 4 has realised that in some certain circumstances, there may be a break glass situation where you absolutely need access to a system, a payment system, for whatever example. And under these mitigating circumstances, you're allowed to use a shared or group account to actually get into that target system should you need it in an emergency. So those sort of things are allowable now, but again, there's always going to have to be a case behind that and understanding the risk involved with having those accounts enabled or disabled at any given point in time. Now, a lot of organizations run risk management, and I'm certain that most of the organizations on the call today will have some sort of risk methodology within the organization to cover all sorts of risk within your businesses. So aligned to that now, PCI Compliance is looking at targeted risk analysis, which is then going to empower you as an organization to apply certain risk controls around customer data, sensitive information, but more predominantly payment card industry compliance data. So you can actually start embedding PCI compliance within your own risk analysis and methodologies. There's also a new approach to completing the assessment. It's called a customized approach. It's around a new method of implementing and validating your PCI compliance. It's really intended for organizations that have decided and been completing PCI compliance for a number of years. And it allows that organization really to take a more strategic approach to the objectives of PCI compliance. But really, it's if it's your first time through PCI compliance, it's not for you. This is for more long-established organisations that have got real handle of their risk management. So I talked a little bit about validation and assessment. So there's a lot more validation requirements now for doing PCI compliance, but there's an increased really alignment between information gathered in a report on compliance or a self-assessment questionnaire, which is now summarised in the attestation of compliance. So what this really is enabling is giving the receiving parties a more clear and informed understanding of the PCI compliance status within any entity. So there's a lot more, I guess, visibility of the environment that's being assessed. So if you're, for example, if you're checking out a third-party service provider as part of your due diligence, then an attestation of compliance now should give you a bit more clear and defined understanding of what you're actually signing up for and how they're governing their PCI compliance. There's a lot of other lot of application around PAN discovery tasks, ASV scans. There's a lot of mandated controls now for e-commerce platforms, and around the broader application for encrypted cardholder data and trusted networks. So there's a lot of quite a few technical controls that I'll briefly touch on today, but they're quite complex and maybe not applicable to everybody. So there's no point going into too much detail on the webinar for today. Also, login and monitoring. There's some changes here. So a lot of version 3.2.1 already stated that centralized log collection and management should be in place. There's a lot more now around moving away from physical log reviews where errors can be present, for example, through manual reviews, and there's a move towards an automated mechanisms to view those logs and alert back any anomalies within those. So we're not going to start missing oversights and errors that we may not have weren't seen in doing the manual checks on those logs. So there's the move towards automation in that sense, and without mentioning AI at this point, you know, that there are probably some tools out there that could actually help with automated mechanisms in terms of reviewing lots and lots of audit logs, etc. So let's just talk quickly around some of key blockers we've experienced. Version 4 has been out for 2 years now. There's a 2-year transition period, so it's finally introduced and the go-to now as of 1st of April. So we've been working with some early clients around transition tasks, and also working with a lot of live clients as they move away from 3.2.1 and we implement version 4. So there's a lot of blockers that we are experiencing. So some don't look that bad, but you know, some are actually quite problematic. And the first one we come across a lot of now is roles and responsibilities. So there's a new requirement for, like I said earlier, taking ownership of your role and your responsibility. And the thing is here is not to overthink it. We've seen a lot of organisations take this requirement as, okay, well, if my role's changing, then you've got to reapply for your job, etc. It's certainly not intended to be at that level. It's more around having a defined role within the organisation. And as an example, if you're an IT manager in charge of making sure that secure payments are done over an internet provider that is secure, then these are the specific roles that you're responsible for. So there's a lot of emphasis around taking ownership of these roles and calling out, not necessarily by name, but certainly calling out by function within the organisation of who's actually responsible for these types of areas when it concerns cardholder data. So that's turning into a bit of a problem, depending on organisation, depending how the management team are sitting, etc. So that's one of our blockers we get quite a lot. Another one again is some of the technical controls. The problem is the PCI Council have stated that change and tamper detection mechanisms must be deployed to alert unauthorized access and modifications to scripts on their web pages. It's a great big mouthful of compliance, and it's like, well, how on earth does an organization begin to look at a solution for that? The vendors themselves are slowly coming out now with solutions and services that provide these types of technical solutions, if you like, but we're in early stages at the moment of implementing any of this, and this is confusing to organizations. So e-commerce platforms, for example, if you've got requirement 643 is client-side security. So as an example, so you're meant to ensure that the scripts that are running on your client-side web pages are valid, authorized, integral, necessary. You get alerted when anything changes. These sort of things are proven to be quite a headache for clients, and also the responsibility of that is that the client that provides the payment page, is it the payment service provider that provides the payment services? There's a lot of, is it the web host company? Is it the website developers? There's a lot of confusion and lack of understanding about who's ultimately responsible for this. So that's just one area. There's also unauthorized changes to payment pages as well. You know, the version 4 standard now says that you have to detect and respond to alerts every 7 days or periodically. So periodically, what does that mean? Is that should be aligned to your frequency defined in your risk analysis. So there's a lot more onus on organizations to actually understand these controls in more detail and understand your requirements once you know that it's your responsibility to have these tools in place. So it's quite a grey area at the moment, which we're seeing quite a few companies experience some issues here. So moving on to some of the other experiences. So we've got when you're using service providers to handle your card payments, you would normally have an attestation of compliance. They should be PCI compliant for you. There's a new area, if you like, of shared responsibilities matrix. So most service providers now are providing these. Some have already a long time ago that they worked out that it'd be really useful document to have as who's responsible for what in terms of cardholder data security when it's in the service providers environment or whether it's in the client's environment. So the shared responsibilities matrix is a really good document that would avoid any confusion, but it must align to the attestation of compliance. So if you're using a service provider that you want them to process card data on your behalf, then make sure that that's their responsibility for securing that, and they're not just pushing that back to the client side of responsibility. So that will take some dissecting at some point if you're using third parties. So but that's just another document to align to, and we see contracts written around shared responsibilities matrix, for example. So they're quite critical documents to get from your service providers. I touched very briefly targeted risk analysis. This is really, as opposed to a traditional sort of enterprise-wide risk management frameworks, you know, this is really around targeting those risks to the PCI requirements, which will then allow the organization flexibility around how it governs those controls and how it applies security to the requirements that are in scope for them. So this is quite new, and for some that don't manage risk so much, then this can be a bit of an unnerving situation to be in, where we just align in PCI controls and requirements around your internal sort of risk methodologies and things. So, but it's not, you know, it's cardholder data security is risk-based. It's, you know, what controls you apply to minimize the risk of that cardholder data being abused. So it shouldn't be anything too unusual, but it just needs to be added into your organizational risk controls. Another one, definition of frequencies changed a little bit as well. I just mentioned a minute ago, periodically. That's a classic, you know, or how long is how long, you know. But again, this reverts back to your risk management. So if you don't see the need to scan your internal networks every 3 months, then, you know, there'll be a risk statement to say why we don't see that as a big risk, and we're moving it to 6 monthly scans, etc. So there's a lot of periodic type requirements that really should align to your internal risk methodology. So as an assessor, we'll be looking at your scope of applicable requirements that they're needed, and then aligning that to, you know, what are you doing about risk around that, and you know, looking at you know, the methodologies and the means for that risk around those controls. So it's quite it's not something like a tick box exercise every year now. This has become a far bigger beast, if you like. Okay, so those really are just a highlight of some of the things we've seen. There's a whole load of a whole lot of more controls and requirements that we do occasionally find problems with, but that's for another day. But what should you do now? So if you're, I know some of you may already be version 4, some are looking to transition to version 4, and maybe some haven't even thought about it too much. But the key thing is it's the only version out at the moment. There will be tweaks along the way, and I'm sure there'll be version 4.1 will be out within the end of the year, I would imagine, with some updates. But yeah, whatever you do, you sort of make an action plan now, understand in a bit more detail how these changes may affect you in your environment. Assess where you are now. There's no harm in just looking at what you've already done. Maybe you've completed 3.2.1 and you just want to align to version 4 and see what new controls may be incorporated in your environment. Absolutely assess where you are right now, and then create that roadmap and with some goals along the way, just so you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think I'm handing back over to Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So how can we help you if you need any assistance with this? If you want a particular hand-holding through the process and you feel that a one-off audit of where you are, along with an actionable plan of how to move forward, that's a service that we can offer. And we've got experienced QSAs and Pete here on hand, happy to talk you through questions or concerns. And you can get in touch with us at any time and we'll do our best to help you. But I'd also like to introduce you to something new, which is our free PCI DSS version 4 readiness assessment. Now, Pete mentioned just now about understanding where you are. Well, this is our attempt to help you do that. This is brand new. It's first time now today, the first people that we've mentioned this to. It is now live. We'll send out links, but securious.scoreapp.com, and it's an assessment to show you how ready you are for PCI version 4. And it's designed to provide a high level of overview of your readiness. Basically, you go on it, it's going to take you 5 minutes. You answer 15 high-level questions about your environment, and you'll receive a personalized report back with feedback tailored to your specific needs. So say it takes a few minutes, it's free, and you'll get access to the results instantly. We'll send out a link to the assessment when we send out the slides later on this. And basically, this is something we'd love you to try and give us a bit of feedback on, because one of the things we're keen to do is provide more resources, more tools, more ways of helping and building a community really of PCI compliant companies, confident PCI compliant companies. And it'd be good to know if you find this useful, and perhaps even more importantly, if you find that there are areas, and the feedback is actually broken into 4 sections of sort of areas where the requirements have been updated. So we'll look at technical controls, we look at policies, procedures, and documentation, passwords and multi-factor authentication, and login and monitoring. So you get an overall score, but you'll also get a score in each of those areas. And if we can try and understand areas where people don't feel as confident as a result of doing this assessment, we can provide more help in those areas as well. So it helps guide us to help you more effectively. And this is the sort of, along with these webinars, it's the first of a series of tools like this that we help to build, we're hoping to build. And it would be great to have you sort of as our early access group to try things like this out and give us feedback. And so we're trying to build a confident community of PCI compliant companies. So have a go at it and let us know how you get on. And just to summarize, hopefully doing justice to what Pete has said before we move on to the questions, there is a lot changing with version 4. We've been talking about it for the best part of 2 years now, and we've been saying, oh, act sooner rather than later. Well, the kind of soon as probably gone, and it is a little bit later now, but it is definitely the time to act. Get up to speed and get on board as soon as you possibly can now. Do try that new assessment to see where you are in terms of your likely readiness, and keep in touch to see how we can help you. Now we're going to move over to questions. If you have a question, perhaps you could please just enter it into the chat now, and we will try and get to it. I said we have a few that have been sent in, so I guess while we're waiting for you to add your own, let me just, I've got a couple here. So I'm going to start off with a question, Pete. It says, what if we're not ready by our compliance deadline? What happens if we go past the expiry date?
Yeah, that's a good question. Get that quite a lot. It is written in stone, but it's not written in stone, if that makes sense. So if you are approaching your compliance day, so you're all aware it's an annual event, isn't it? So so it's an annual assessment. So if you're nearing it or you've gone past it, then normally what happens is your acquirer or your service providers or even your customers will ask for your attestation of compliance. If you can't produce a valid one, then they'll go elsewhere generally. But in the real world, so long as you've engaged with a PCI QSA or a company, or you're actually meeting you're actually going through that process already, then, and you've got evidence of that, then most service providers and you know, Visa, MasterCard will allow a sort of almost up to a 90-day window of so long as they're happy that you're working with an organisation that's helping with PCI compliance, or you're in fact going through that yourself. So it's not absolutely. I think the level of merchant, and if you're a service provider, certainly try not to go beyond the expiry date, because you know you are offering those services that are compliant to other organisations. So it's imperative that service providers maintain their annual assessment day, but there is a bit of flex and movement in there, and we all appreciate that there's changes within your environments, technical changes and other things. So you know, you can't always do it around the same time every year. So if you are looking at implementing any office moves or additional payment processes, etc., it's worth getting in early and getting an assessment done earlier rather than beyond the date. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Pete. Next question I've got is there any wriggle room? What if I can't meet one of the requirements, for example, on password minimum length?
Yeah, so there isn't wiggle room as such. We can't assess an organisation and then put future dated requirements, you know, or next month that'll be implemented, we're all good to go on that. We can't do that. So I guess the wiggle room, and the example about passwords is quite a good one. Wiggle room would require what they call a customer I can't think of the word now. Customized approach to the that's not the word. I've completely forgotten the word. Compensating control. Thank you. God, compensating control. So yeah, sorry about that. There's no wiggle room. It's compensating control. So if you can't meet any requirement for whatever reason, and we mentioned passwords, if your system can only accept 10 minimum password characters, then the compensating control will have to be above and beyond what the requirements are asking. So it is, I guess, an official wiggle room, but it doesn't get away from not doing the control. And compensating control has to be assessed. It has to be seen to be beyond what the requirements are asking. So you have to go. The security controls have to be more than what the requirement would be as in place for your compensating control.
Thanks, Pete. Again, if anybody's got any questions now, do just put them in the chat and we'll move straight on to them. But in the absence of that, the next one I've got here is, do you need to segment your network to be compliant?
That's a good question. That's probably could be headed under the myths of PCI compliance. So a lot of organizations think they have to segment their network and to reduce scope to be compliant. That's not actually true. You can have the whole network or environment in scope for PCI compliance. The recommendation is to minimize your scope, and goes back to the risk. So minimizing your cardholder data environment is minimizing your risk. So you're not handling as much card data as you need to. And one of those methods of reducing scope and reducing that risk is network segmentation. So you're segmenting your environment, your network, to only incorporate certain areas of that your whole business that are actually PCI compliant, would come under that PCI requirements and PCI DSS. So yeah, it's not required, but it is advised, because why would you want to bring the whole environment into scope unnecessarily if you can actually segment to reduce that scope? So yeah, that's a good question, and we get that a lot actually.
Thank you very much. In terms of sort of time and input, this question I think is getting at. It says, does version 4 take longer than 3.2.1? Does it? I assume what they're asking is, does it require more input, both on the sort of client side and potentially on our side or the assessor side?
Yeah, in generally they do. Version 3.2.1 is a scenario where, you know, that's been out. That version's been valid since 2018. So as we go through the assessment process, the gap analysis and things, we get good at that. We get, you know, everyone seems to understand version 3.2.1. With a new version, as with anything new, there's a whole new learning place really for us and the clients. Version 4 is really heavy on scope, so there's a lot of work up front to understand the environment and get to grips with not just the standard things like network diagrams and card flow data. It's, you know, we'll be talking to your third-party service providers and understanding their environments a little bit more in detail. Web hosting companies will need to look a bit more detail into how they're managing the you know, the scripts, alerting and all that good stuff. So, and again, depending on level of organization, if it's a level 1 report on compliance, then, you know, we're looking at, you know, quite a few more sections in there that we need to complete as assessors. So it is a joined up thing though. There'll be a lot more conversation with clients. There'll be a lot more responsibilities that the clients need to meet. But in general, as with anything new, and the new sort of requirements that are involved with version 4, then they do take more time, and a bit more time maybe to implement and document. So yeah, they are taking a bit longer.
Great, thank you. And last chance then to get any questions of your own now into the chat. I'm just going to ask one question of my own actually, Pete, is whether there's anything we haven't mentioned in terms of any other services or ways that we can help people with their PCI compliance.
Yeah, so we're obviously a 3DS assessor company as well. So not sure if there's many relevant companies on the call, but we do that as a service as well. And most of our, you know, we're a cybersecurity company, a PCI QSA company, but we do other things. We do SIEM solutions for centralized login monitoring, etc. We do penetration testing, so we can meet those requirements for any pen testing, etc. We do ASV scans for approved scanning vendor. For external scans, we can do internal pen tests, segmentation tests, and all that sort of stuff. So without putting a big sales head on, you know, we do cover a lot of the technical controls internally. So it's sort of you know, we're not just here as assessors and finding fault with the environments. We're actually here to help and guide you through it and offer some you know, solutions that may help with the smooth transition and ongoing compliance. So
great, thank you, Pete. Well, with that, I would just then like to say thank you, Pete, for presenting today. Thanks to Holly, who's behind us, who's made all the technical stuff work, and most of all, thank you to all of you for taking time out to come along today. We will send out a copy of the slides to you all later today and a link through to our readiness assessment, which, as I say, we'd love you to have a go at that and send us your thoughts and feedback. And if it highlights any areas that you feel you're not as confident as you'd like to be, then shout and we'll see what we can do to help. Because if you're feeling that way, there's probably other people out there that are feeling exactly the same way as well. We'll also put together a recording of this session, so if you want to refer back to it, we'll get that out. That'll probably be a week or so before we turn that around. And in the meantime, really, if you do have any other questions that you haven't wanted to ask today or haven't remembered to ask today, stick them on an email and come through to us, and Pete will get back to you with any thoughts and feedback. So with that, Holly, is there anything else I need to say? No, with that, thank you very much indeed for coming along, and hopefully we'll speak to you and see you again soon. Thank you.